This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Hey, what's up, and welcome to the very first Cleveland Browns rewatch. And this is something I hope to do for a very long time, for the next few years, because it's an exercise that I think will make us all better. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewatch the whole season from last year, but closer to the upcoming season. The reason I want to do that is doing sports talk for a little while. I've noticed that we spend a lot of time in March, in April, in May, in June, July, August, talking about things that happened in September, October, months before. But we're talking about them from pure recollection. We're not actually going back and reviewing the game and talking about what happened in that game. We're kind of just remembering parts of it. And when you try to remember parts of what happened in the game, you really do forget some pivotal parts of the game, the context of the game, right? And I think this is a great game to start on. We're going to start from week 1 of this year versus Cincinnati's game. Happened at 1 o'clock, had horrible weather conditions in this game.
My tiny hand. They're going to talk about it now, but that ball just slipped because of the wet conditions.
Evan Washburn telling us that this is the hardest the rain has come down so far this afternoon. And there is a wind factor as well. That may explain the Deshaun Watson underthrow from earlier.
I think this is a key example of a game where once people started adding their input who did not have the full context of what happened into this game, they dramatically changed the narrative of what happened in this game. But the narrative that they gave for this game is not an accurate reflection of what happened during this game. So my initial thoughts before I kind of go into the whole breakdown of it is I was surprised how much better Deshaun Watson was in this game versus what I remember. I remember that the line that most people were using was that he was okay. I think he was above average. The grade I gave him for this game is a B. I thought he made some really key plays. And just watching this one game, the first game of the season, it really makes me question how much people watch that have to take that Deshaun Watson, yes, he went 5-1 with the Browns as a starter this year, but he didn't make plays to help them win in that run. This game alone has like 4 or 5 plays where he was obviously a big part of the Cleveland Browns' success. And it's just interesting that people act like it didn't happen. Like there was like a completely different game happening. This is what happens when you don't review a game based on what happened on broadcast and you only go off of what you see on all 22 and you only go off of what you see in the box score, because when you don't watch the broadcast version of the game, you miss a lot of context, right? When you're just going off condensed or film, you lose a lot of context in between who's in, who's out, what the weather's like. And this is a key example of it. But yeah, that's what I hope to do with this series of videos, is kind of go over the entire Brown season. And then by the time we get to the start of camp, we'll be at the end of the rewatch. So then we can evaluate what the Browns need, what the expectations should be with fresh eyes. So without further ado, let's get into this week 1 rewatch. And the first thing that pops off tape here is how good this defense was this entire game. And it's not just Myles Garrett. Obviously, Myles Garrett is the best defensive player in the NFL right now. But it was guys like Grant Delpit. It was guys like Denzel Ward, Ronnie McLeod, I thought really played a solid game. Greg Newsome was excellent in this game. And Sione Takitaki, like I was watching this game thinking to myself, man, I think we're going to miss Sione Takitaki a little bit more than we're anticipating, or at least a little bit more than I was anticipating, because he is making plays all up and down the field. Like, he's a legitimate playmaker. I think the Browns are going to miss him unless they find somebody who could replace him in terms of playmaking ability. He was a real, not a giant piece to what the Browns are doing. Like, he's not a bigger piece than Grant Delpit or the corners, but he was a real nice piece to add, like another guy rallying to the football. Early in this game, I think the offensive line struggled. Obviously, we know that the weather was affecting both quarterbacks. Like, I'll have clips here of Joe Burrow missing throws, Deshaun Watson missing throws. It was interesting to see both of these quarterbacks struggle with the weather in two very different ways. So Deshaun Watson struggles with throwing the football, I think, came from two areas. I think he was over gripping. Like, you could tell that, like, a lot of his balls, they spiked low as if he gripped it too hard. And I think he had a hard time finding his footing in this turf for whatever reason. Joe Burrow's issues throwing the ball, he couldn't get a good grip on this. Like, there were a lot of balls that just popped out of his hand because he didn't get a good grip on it. One of the things we forget that happened in this game, Jerome Ford had a fumble on the 10-yard line, so the Browns were 10 yards away from scoring. Jerome Ford fumbles. That really does change the outlook of this game, because if Jerome Ford doesn't fumble that ball, at the very least, the Browns get a field goal, if not a touchdown. And I'm just going to tell you right now, the entire first half of this game was as dominant as you can be by only being up 7 or 10 points. Like, the Browns weren't up by a ton in the first half of this game, but it was like, I would describe it like this. The first half of this game was a Cold War that the Browns were dominating, right? Like, they weren't putting up points. No team was. It was a punt back and forth, but it was obvious to me that the Browns were able to move the ball with much more ease than the Bengals were. So it felt like it was only a matter of time before the Browns scored, versus when you watch the Bengals, they had nothing. Like, Joe Burrow couldn't get a good grip on the ball. And even when Joe Burrow did get a good grip on the ball, the Browns corners were just ferocious in this game, just really had their way. Like, when Martin Emerson is in a situation where he doesn't have to worry about getting beat deep, he is one of the best corners in the NFL. Like, when he has that comfort in this game with the weather, he had relative confidence that they weren't going to try to throw over his head, or even if they did, it wasn't going to be an accurate throw. And man, when he's in that situation, he is dominant because he's allowed to be physical. He's going to have those instincts. He had a hell of a game in this one. And I think it's partly that confidence that he had there. Also, another thing, I think the punt coverage was great in this game. It's something that I was critical about in a video I did a couple weeks ago. I'm wondering if that's going to hold up throughout this rewatch, some of the criticisms that I had about the Browns and some of the praises that I had about the Browns. But one area where I was critical was punt coverage. In this game, at least, it was really good. I think Cam Mitchell made a play here in punt coverage that made me think to myself, this is why he's going to be a really good nickel DB, because, like, look how he comes across field, pursues this angle, and then maintains a great angle while using that speed. Just some great stuff there from Cam Mitchell that makes you think that you could project him going forward to being a solid nickel cornerback, to maybe even a solid physical guy that can go out there and play some boundary. But then once we got to the late part of the second quarter, I think the rain started to die down a little bit, and I think this is where context matters, right? When it comes to how you judge a game, because you can look at this first half and you say, hey, Deshaun just went 10 of 20. The numbers don't look great. He was mid, but it's about when you have that production, right? They were able to get the field goal off of something Watson did. And then in this drive right here, the 2-minute drive before the end of the first half, I thought Deshaun Watson did a great job making some plays to make sure that the Browns could score. This throw is another example of that, where he makes this beautiful pass to Donovan Peoples-Jones layered right over a linebacker. I mean, that's a difficult throw to make in any weather, but to make it in a monsoon of rain, which it was in Cleveland Browns Stadium, that's a very, very impressive throw there from Deshaun, and a very impressive part of the game as well for Deshaun Watson. So, like, stuff like that is where I'm going to rank plays higher if they happen in a pivotal moment of the game. And right there, the Browns are about to go into halftime. They've been dominating this game, but they don't have a big lead, right? I think it's tied at this point. And then Deshaun makes that throw that spurs them on to being able to score later on in that drive. And that was a huge throw, right? If you don't make that throw, that drive stalls out. That's a completely different ball game. It's a big throw there. And again, it's why context matters, because you can, again, look at it, 10 to 20, 117 total yards and a touchdown. You're not going to think that's super impressive. But when you compare to what Joe Burrow was doing in that weather, and in that first half, Joe Burrow had 6 of 14, so less efficient, and had 35 total yards. What you can see there is that one quarterback found a way to be productive in this game, while another quarterback was not at all productive. So again, the context is so important, and it gets lost when we just look at the stats and kind of read football instead of watching it. And I say this all the time, football's meant to be watched, not read. It's a watch sport. You got to watch it. You can't read it. Let's go to the second half of this game. I thought Deshaun, this is a nice throw in a bad pocket. Like, it kind of crumbled up in him. Like, I feel like this is when Deshaun Watson is at his best, is when he's standing tall in that pocket and being patient with his routes. I know he can do the stuff when he scrambles and slips outside of a sack, but I don't think he's great when he anticipates contact and tries to run out the pocket and then make a throw on the run. I think he's much better when he gets hit, he stays on his feet, he has incredible contact balance, and then he does all that stuff. And I think he's just in general better when he gives himself more time in the pocket to cook, because that's when you see the accuracy, the ball placement. He's a much better quarterback to me when he does that. This throw is an example of it. Now, this is an interesting point of the game, because after this, the Browns get close. In the story of the season, they turn the ball over. Deshaun Watson gets a tip ball interception. It's a tip ball, and you can take the blame off of Deshaun for that. I think the ball got tipped because Deshaun's feet slipped, and that really messed with the angle of the trajectory of the ball that came out of his hand. But tip ball interception happens. And this is where I think the game is won or lost by the Cleveland Browns. So a brief summary, and then I'll go into detail about what happened. So Deshaun Watson throws this interception. It's a big momentum swing for Cincinnati. Right now, they're not down by that much. I believe they're only down by 7 points in this game. So that interception happens. And what happens after that is that the Browns get a stop, which is huge. Then they get their next possession. The Browns offense gets a field goal. And then they get another stop against Cincinnati. And then they get another field goal. Those 4 drives, and this is what made the Browns such a good and dangerous football team, no matter who was at quarterback, is because they did not require a quarterback to play 4 quarters of great football, right? Like, bad teams that are lifted by great quarterback play, they require the quarterback to be awesome every drive. The reason the Browns were able to have so much success last year is that that's all they needed. They needed 4 drives of complimentary football. They even scored touchdowns on the offensive side of the ball. 4 drives of complimentary football, and this game was over with. That's what makes them a dominant team. That's what makes them able to win with PJ Walker. That's what makes them able to win with Joe Flacco. That's what makes them able to win with DTR. That's what makes them able to win with Deshaun Watson, is because all they really need from a quarterback is 2 good drives after 2 straight defensive possessions, right? Four possessions of complimentary football that won them the game, because those 4 possessions happen. Cincinnati panics, goes for it on 4th down. Browns get the turnover. Nick Chubb, Deshaun Watson, they bring that thing home. Now let's kind of dig in to how this happened real quick. I think this set here from the Browns defense is pretty impressive. Just the Browns being able to force their will on Cincinnati. And again, they did this back to back to back, 3 straight drives where they just stopped them. And all they needed the offense to do was just get points, right? The offense only got 6 points in those 4 drives. But it was enough to make Cincinnati panic, think that they're getting out this game. Now it's the fourth quarter. They go for it. The Browns get that. It's just such a great example of what made this team special and why they were so resilient is because ultimately they just needed 2-3 good drives out the quarterback position in order to win games. I think that's going to carry over into next year. You get some big plays on offense, right? Watson, he makes this big run after the first stop that extends this drive into scoring range. Nick Chubb, when you have that threat of Nick Chubb and Deshaun Watson on the ground, these kind of things, the complementary football, it's much easier to come by. You're seeing it in this game. Think how much easier the Browns' life would have been if when the defense was getting those stops in the Seattle game. Then they have Nick Chubb and Deshaun Watson to run out the clock instead of it being Jerome Ford and PJ Walker. Imagine how that comeback would have been versus Houston in the playoff game, where instead of relying on Joe Flacco to throw you back into the lead, it's Deshaun Watson and Nick Chubb. They can run you back into the lead. They can throw you back. Like, you have those options. I just think that that's why they were the point differential was such more drastic with those guys there, because you just had some safe ways of melting away these games. Yeah, and Martin Emerson was a menace. You get this next stop. Grant Delpit is a menace. You get the ball back, and then Jerome Ford and David Njoku help you carry that thing across the board, get another field goal. Then Myles Garrett does his thing on fourth down, and then all you need is Nick Chubb and Deshaun Watson to bring that thing home. You're there to victory. That's a good, solid team win. I think Nick Chubb contributed significantly to that. David Njoku contributed significantly to that. Deshaun Watson contributed significantly to that. Like, you got some great contributions from your big players on the offensive side of the ball in some key moments. And then the defense helped bring it home. And I think this is the recipe for the Cleveland Browns at the very least, right? Play great defense, salt away the game offensively. Nobody can really mess with you when you're in that zone. Again, we're going to see this in the Baltimore game too when we get to that rewatch in week 10. But all this Browns team ever needs is 4 possessions of complementary football. An offensive score, a defensive stop, an offensive score, a defensive stop. If they get that, it's curtains for almost any teams that they play when they're healthy. And that's what makes this Browns. That's all it takes. If you're a team playing against the Browns, think about that. Think how much pressure that puts on you. You know that it only takes 2 bad offensive drives and 2 bad defensive drives. Game's over. That's what happened to Cincinnati. That's what happened to a lot of teams that played the Cleveland Browns. But that's my thoughts on this rewatch. If I had to give grades out, Deshaun Watson gets a B. Thought he could have had some throws that he could connect it on. Obviously, the Marquise Goodwin one. I don't think he was perfect in this game, but I think he was pretty damn good. Nick Chubb in this game, I thought he was pretty damn good. Not perfect, not the best Nick Chubb game we've ever seen, but a pretty damn good Nick Chubb game. And the Browns defense, that was the MVP to me in this game. I think they made everything possible. The rain assisted them, but as we see later on, the rain ain't the only reason why they were able to be dominant against the Cincinnati Bengals. So they get an A. But y'all, thank you for watching this. Make sure you stay locked in to watch the whole season of rewatches. And if you want to rewatch with me, just know I'm watching the broadcast version. So if you want to do that along with me, that'd be great. And let me know for my Patreon people if you would want me to live stream when I'm rewatching it, just to give you guys some extra stuff. Let me know in the comment section there as well. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.